Hello and welcome to part 3 of module 7 in our Django series. This is the last session for this module. During this session, we're going to talk about how we can send an email using the Django mail module. And we'll also discuss the Django ModelForm class before implementing it in our code. However, before we get down to these two, there is an issue we need to address with regard to the student ID and its generation. So for that, come to your command prompt. Change directory to the virtual environment, activate the environment, start VS Code, change directory to the container folder, and run the server. Go to the browser and go to the admin site. Let's log in now. Now, if you click on students, you can see that some of them are in order and others are not, right? So what this is going to do is it's going to count the number of students here or the student objects and then give us an XID which is not accurate, right? So what we need to do is delete the ones that are not in order, for example, this and the rest of these, right? So whatever you see on your screen, in terms of student IDs that are not in order, just delete them. From the action list, select delete selected students, click go, click yes, I'm sure. And now we have these student IDs which are in order. So that the next student ID that is generated is S005. Now let's log out of the site. Come to your views.py file. As you may have already figured out, when we have the 100th student admitted, the ID generated would be S0100. That's not what we want, right? We want the ID to be S100. So we'll tweak this code a bit, put in an elif here, student count less than 100. Then this line of code will be executed. Else new ID equal to S plus str of student count plus 1. So now if we run this, let's go to our home page. Click on enrollment. And you can see we have S005 there, right? So you can put in some details, submit, and that's it. Now let's talk about how we can send an email. To send an email, we will use a send mail function that needs to be imported from the django.core.mail module. Now the mail is going to be sent using the SMTP host and the port number as specified in our settings.py file, and we'll do that shortly. In terms of the arguments, the required arguments are the subject of the email email message, the sender, the receiver or receivers, and this will be in list format, and fail silently, which will be false, so that if there is an error, then an exception will be raised. In terms of the return value of this function, it's going to be the number of successfully delivered messages. Now, since there is just one email going out to one or more recipients, the return value will be 0 or 1. Now, there is one more function called send mass mail. It needs to be imported from the same module. It's used for handling mass emailing, right? So we can send different messages to different email IDs. What is the major difference between send mail and send mass mail? Well, with send mail, a connection needs to be open every time that the send mail function is executed, whereas with send mass mail, a single connection is open for all messages. The return value is the number of successfully delivered messages. Now let's look at examples for both of these. So here you can see this is send mail being used. We're specifying the arguments there. We've got subject, the message, the sender, the recipient list and fail silently. And now if you look at send mass mail essentially we can have a tuple of tuples, and each tuple is in the format of subject, message, sender, receiver, right? And then we pass that tuple of tuples to send mass mail. Now let's go ahead and incorporate send mail in our code, and we'll start by importing send mail from Django.core.mail import send mail. In our thanks view, we'll call the function. So send mail, and we need to put in those arguments. So the subject is going to be enrollment, the message. Then we need to put in the sender email address. So this is going to be your email address. Now we've got to specify the list of recipients. Now here you need to put in the same email address as you're putting in there. Okay, and I'll tell you why shortly. And then of course fail silently should be false, so that we can have an exception raised if there is an error, right? Now again, make sure that the email address that you've put in here is the same as the one you've put in for the receiver. Now why I'm asking you to do that? For that, let me take you back to the slides. We need to generate an app password. To do that, if you're using Gmail, click on this apps button and then click on account, which will bring you to this page, right? Once you're there, in the search bar, type in app passwords. That's what we're looking for, and you can see that in the drop down list. Click on app passwords, which will bring you to this page. Click on this down arrow button, which will give you these choices. Select other custom name, put in the name of the app, click on generate, which will give you this screen, right? And you'll have a password here. Be very careful with the password that's generated, because as you can see down here, this password grants complete access to your Google account, right? So don't let it fall into the wrong hands. Before clicking on done, make sure that you copy this password. So select it, Control C, and then come to your settings.py file and put in these settings. So you can start with a comment there and then put in email backend. This is the default backend that Django will use. The email host for Gmail is smtp.gmail.com. And then I have for Yahoo and Office 365, as in if you're using Hotmail. Now the next setting you have is email use TLS. TLS, the full form being transport layer security, that needs to be set to true. Email port is 587, right? And that's applicable for Yahoo and Office 365 as well. Email host user, you will put in the same email address as you used when we use the send mail function in our view, right? And again, that same email address will go here. And here, the password that you just copied, you can paste it there. Now, as for why we're using the same email address both for sender and receiver in the view, that's because the password we generated, that is the app password, this one, this will be used to authenticate that email account that we specified. And of course, this authentication is done with the SMTP server, and thus the email will come through to our account. If we use another account, there's no way authentication can be done with the SMTP server, and therefore connection will fail. Right, so that completes the modifications we need to make in our settings.py file. Now we can go ahead and run this. So come to your browser and click on enrollment, put in the details, Click submit. And now if you check your email, the same address as you had specified, then you should have received an email with the subject enrollment, right? If there is any issue you're having, just post in the comments, please. Thank you. Right. Now let's talk about the need for the ModelForm class. In every web application that is database driven, the form fields map very closely to the model fields as we have seen in our own application, right? It's redundant therefore to define form fields because they're already defined in the models. So Django provides us with a helper class that allows us to create the form class from the model. Now in terms of field types and validation, every model field will have a corresponding form field, and we can define the form class in the models.py file, but you can also have it in the forms.py file, and that's what we are going to do, right? In terms of validation, that will be triggered by the isValid method. So let's now go ahead and modify the code so as to use the ModelForm class. To do that, we need to come to our forms.py file, comment this out, and then put in class student form inheriting from forms.modelForm. Okay, now we need to import ModelForm. So here from Django.forms import ModelForm. We need to specify the class meta, and that's going to be the name of the model, which is student, right? And the fields that we need. So fields equal to, that's going to be in list format, the field names as we specified in our model. For our attributes, we use widgets equal to, within a dictionary, we specify the name of the field and the widget. Now again, we've got to import this. So after ModelForm, put in text input. And within brackets, we specify the attributes equal to dictionary format. The key is going to be read only, and the value is going to be read only. Now, since we are importing ModelForm, if you delete this part, that should work as well. Right? So that's all the changes we need to make in our forms.py file. Now we need to go back to our views.py file and make changes in our enrolled student view. So come to views.py, to the enrolled student view. And here, wherever we have ST, we'll put in student. Remember now we are using the same names as in the model, right? So this again will be student. Right? And then instead of STID, now we've got to specify student ID. Okay, we don't need to change these. Remember here we are using the names of the variables into which we're getting the clean data. Right, so those remain the same. Right, so now we can go ahead and run this and we should get the same results. Make sure the server is running. Restart the server. Click on enrollment. Near the next ID, put in some details. Click on submit. Right? So this ends our session for today. In the next session, we'll talk about the Django Sessions framework. So till then, take care. Bye.